The sterile corridors of St. Mary's Hospital stretched endlessly before Kathleen Thompson as she made her way to the obstetrics ward. The rhythmic click of her shoes against the polished floor echoed in the quiet hallway, each step bringing her closer to a moment she had both longed for and dreaded. At 35, Kathleen was pregnant for the 5th time, and the weight of her past losses hung heavy on her shoulders. As she approached the reception desk, Kathleen took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation she knew was coming. The nurse behind the desk looked up, a practiced smile on her face. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. Here for your 20-week checkup." Kathleen nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, but I've made a decision. I won't be having any ultrasounds or prenatal testing." The nurse's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her features. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson, but that's highly unusual. These tests are crucial for monitoring your baby's health and development." Kathleen's jaw tightened, her resolve strengthening. "I understand, but I've done my research. I believe in natural care. My body knows what it's doing." The nurse's expression shifted from confusion to concern. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Thompson, Kathleen, given your history, these tests are even more important. They can help prevent dash." "No," Kathleen interrupted, her voice firm despite the tremor she felt in her chest. "I've made my decision. This time, I'm trusting in nature." The nurse held Kathleen's gaze for a long moment before sighing and making a note in her file. "Very well. Dr. Patel will see you shortly to discuss your prenatal care plan." As Kathleen took a seat in the waiting area, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. Was she making the right choice? The faces of the other expectant mothers around her seemed to blur, their excited chatter fading into a distant hum as Kathleen retreated into her thoughts. She thought back to the moment she had first seen those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, the rush of joy quickly followed by paralyzing fear. Each of her previous pregnancies had ended in heartbreak, leaving her feeling betrayed by her own body and the medical system she had trusted. This time, she had vowed, would be different. Kathleen had spent countless hours researching alternative prenatal care methods, immersing herself in online communities that champion natural approaches to pregnancy and childbirth. She had changed her diet, started meditation, and even consulted with a holistic healer. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her pregnancy. "Mrs. Thompson?" Kathleen looked up to see Dr. Patel standing in the doorway, a kind but concerned expression on her face. As Kathleen followed her into the examination room, she braced herself for the conversation she knew was coming. Dr. Patel sat down, her dark eyes studying Kathleen with a mixture of compassion and worry. "Kathleen, I understand you've decided to forego prenatal testing and ultrasounds. Can you tell me more about what led you to this decision?" Kathleen took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Doctor, I've been through this process 4 times now. Each time I followed every recommendation, took every test, and still I lost my babies. I can't go through that again. I need to trust in my body, in nature." Dr. Patel nodded slowly, her expression softening. "I understand your pain, Kathleen.
Truly, I do.
But these tests aren't just about predicting outcomes. They're about ensuring we can provide the best care possible for you and your baby." Kathleen felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "And what if the tests show something's wrong? What then? I don't think I could bear to hear bad news again." Dr. Patel leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Kathleen, knowledge is power. If there are any issues, early detection gives us the best chance to address them. Ignoring potential problems won't make them go away." For a moment, Kathleen wavered. The logical part of her brain knew Dr. Patel was right, but the fear and trauma of her past losses were too strong. She shook her head. "I'm sorry, doctor. I've made my decision." Dr. Patel sighed, recognizing the determination in Kathleen's eyes. "All right, Kathleen. I respect your choice, even if I don't agree with it. But please, promise me you'll come in immediately if you experience any unusual symptoms or concerns." Kathleen nodded, relief washing over her. As she left the clinic, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was taking control of her pregnancy, And this time, everything would be different. The weeks that followed seemed to fly by in a blur of excitement and preparation. Kathleen threw herself into creating the perfect nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and filling the room with plush animals and whimsical decorations. She and her husband, Mark, spent evenings talking to her growing belly, sharing their hopes and dreams for their child's future. Mark, a software engineer with a penchant for logic and data, had initially been skeptical of Kathleen's decision to forego traditional prenatal care. But seeing the peace it brought his wife, he chose to support her, throwing himself into researching natural childbirth methods and holistic approaches to pregnancy. As Kathleen's belly grew, so did her confidence. She reveled in the changes in her body, interpreting every flutter and kick as a sign of her baby's strength and vitality. She attended prenatal yoga classes, joined support groups for natural pregnancy, and even started a blog documenting her journey. But as her pregnancy progressed, Kathleen began to notice changes that nagged at the back of her mind. Her feet and ankles swelled more than she remembered from her previous pregnancies, and a persistent fatigue seemed to settle into her bones. She brushed off these concerns, attributing them to the natural progression of pregnancy and the summer heat. It was a balmy August evening when things took a turn. Kathleen was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when a wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the counter, closing her eyes as the room seemed to spin around her. "Kathleen," Mark's voice came from the doorway, laced with concern. "Are you okay?" She forced a smile, not wanting to worry him. "I'm fine, just a little lightheaded. Probably just need to sit down for a bit." Mark frowned, stepping closer to examine her face. "You look pale, honey. Maybe we should call the doctor." Kathleen shook her head firmly. No doctors. I just need some rest. The baby's probably just pressing on a nerve or something." Despite her reassurances, Mark's worry didn't abate. Over the next few days, he watched his wife closely, noting how she seemed to tire more easily, how her face looked puffy and strained. But every time he suggested seeking medical advice, Kathleen brushed him off, insisting that everything was fine. "The baby knows what it needs," she would say, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. "My body is designed for this. We just need to trust the process." Mark wanted to believe her, wanted to share in her unwavering faith in nature. But as an engineer, he was trained to look for anomalies, to anticipate potential problems before they became critical. And something about Kathleen's condition set off alarm bells in his mind. One afternoon, while Kathleen napped, Mark found himself drawn to her pregnancy blog. He scrolled through the posts, noting the shift in tone from cautious optimism in the early weeks to an almost zealous conviction in the later months. The comments section was filled with supportive messages from other mothers-to-be, all praising Kathleen's courage and dedication to natural childbirth. But one comment caught his eye. It was from a user named Midwife Martha. And unlike the others, it expressed concern. "Kathleen, while I respect your commitment to natural pregnancy, some of the symptoms you've described in your recent posts are concerning. Extreme swelling, persistent headaches, and visual disturbances can be signs of preeclampsia, a serious condition that requires medical attention. Please consider getting checked out just to be safe." The comment had been posted 3 days ago. Kathleen hadn't responded. Mark felt a chill run down his spine. He quickly opened a new tab and began researching preeclampsia. The more he read, the more his concern grew. Many of the symptoms matched what he had observed in Kathleen over the past week. He was about to go wake her when he heard a thud from upstairs, followed by a muffled cry. Heart racing, he took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into their bedroom to find Kathleen on the floor, clutching her head. "Kathleen!" he cried, rushing to her side. "What happened? Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her eyes unfocused and filled with fear. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't see properly. Everything's blurry and there are these spots." In that moment, all of Kathleen's convictions about natural care flew out the window. Mark scooped her into his arms, his heart pounding as he carried her to the car. The drive to the hospital was a blur of fear and desperate prayers. The emergency room erupted into a flurry of activity as soon as they arrived. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Kathleen, their voices a cacophony of medical terms that Mark could barely comprehend.
BP saznolcvan saztíz.
Severe edema? Possible eclampsia. Dr. Patel arrived, her face grim as she assessed Kathleen's condition. We need to perform an emergency C-section, she announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. Kathleen, your baby is in distress, and you're experiencing severe preeclampsia. We need to act now. Kathleen, barely conscious, could only nod weakly. As they wheeled her towards the operating room, she caught Mark's hand. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I should have listened. Mark squeezed her hand, his own eyes brimming with tears. It's okay, honey. Everything's going to be okay. But as the doors to the operating room swung shut, separating them, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The operating room was a hive of controlled chaos, the air thick with tension as the medical team worked swiftly to save both mother and child. Dr. Patel's calm, authoritative voice directed the proceedings, but even she couldn't hide the concern in her eyes as she made the first incision. Kathleen, barely conscious under the influence of the spinal block, was only vaguely aware of what was happening. The bright lights above her blurred and swam, and the voices around her seemed to come from far away. In her mind, she cycled through a whirlwind of emotions: fear, regret, hope, and an overwhelming desire to meet the child she had carried for so long. BP's dropping, a voice called out, urgency clear in its tone. Push another unit of plasma, Dr. Patel responded, her hands moving with practiced precision. We're almost there. The next few moments seemed to stretch into eternity. And then, suddenly, a new sound pierced the air, the cry of a newborn baby. It's a girl, Dr. Patel announced, her voice tinged with relief. But as she lifted the baby, her expression shifted, a flicker of concern crossing her features. Kathleen, fighting against the fog of medication and exhaustion, struggled to focus on her daughter. Is she okay? She managed to whisper. There was a moment of hesitation before Dr. Patel responded, her voice gentle but serious. Kathleen, your daughter is alive and breathing well. But there's an issue we need to address. As the nurses whisked the baby away for immediate examination, Kathleen felt a cold dread settle in her chest. What had her decisions cost her child? Outside in the waiting room, Mark paced relentlessly, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Every time the doors opened, he whirled around, hoping for news. When Dr. Patel finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. Mr. Thompson, she began, gesturing for him to sit. Your wife is stable, and we've managed to control her condition. You have a daughter. Mark felt a rush of relief, quickly followed by a surge of joy. A daughter? Can I see them? Dr. Patel held up a hand, her expression turning serious. There's something you need to know first. Your daughter was born with a rare condition. She doesn't have eyes. The words hit Mark like a physical blow. He staggered back, collapsing into a chair. What do you mean? It's a condition called anophthalmia, Dr. Patel explained gently. It's extremely rare, and in most cases, it's detected during prenatal screenings. With early detection, we can sometimes intervene or at least prepare the parents. But without those screenings, she trailed off, but the implication was clear. Mark buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by a tsunami of emotions: joy at his daughter's birth, fear for her future, and a creeping sense of anger at the choices that had led to this moment. Can I see them? He asked finally, his voice hoarse. Dr. Patel nodded, leading him towards the recovery room. As they walked, she briefed him on what to expect, but nothing could have truly prepared Mark for the sight that greeted him. Kathleen lay in the hospital bed, pale and exhausted but alive. In her arms, swaddled in a soft pink blanket, was their daughter. As Mark approached, Kathleen looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of love and devastation. Mark, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Mark rushed to her side, enveloping both her and their daughter in a gentle embrace.
No, honey, no.
This isn't your fault. We couldn't have known. But even as he spoke the words, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, could they have known? If they had followed the doctor's recommendations, could they have been prepared for this? Kathleen carefully shifted the baby, allowing Mark to see her face fully for the first time. Where eyes should have been, there were only smooth indentations, the lids fused shut. Yet despite this startling absence, their daughter was beautiful, a tiny, perfect being with delicate features and a shock of dark hair. She's gorgeous, Mark breathed, gently stroking the baby's cheek. Have you thought of a name? Kathleen nodded, a small smile playing at her lips despite her tears. Hope, she said softly. Her name is Hope. As Mark held his daughter for the first time, feeling her tiny heartbeat against his chest, he was overcome with a fierce, protective love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The days that followed were a blur of medical consultations, emotional conversations, and sleepless nights. Kathleen and Hope remained in the hospital, monitored closely for any complications. A parade of specialists came through their room, each offering their expertise and outlining the road ahead. Kathleen listened to it all with a growing sense of numbness. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, suffocating in its intensity. Every time she looked at Hope, perfect in every way except for her missing eyes, she felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. Mark, sensing his wife's spiraling emotions, did his best to stay strong for both of them. He threw himself into research, peppering the doctors with questions and making copious notes on Hope's care. But in quiet moments, when Kathleen was sleeping and Hope was in the nursery, he allowed himself to break down, the enormity of their new reality crashing over him. It was during one of these moments, as Mark sat in the hospital chapel seeking a moment of solace, that an unexpected encounter changed everything. He had been sitting in silence, his head bowed and his thoughts a chaotic whirlwind, when he felt a presence beside him. Looking up, he saw a woman in her mid-50s, her salt and pepper hair neatly styled and a serene expression on her face. What caught his attention, however, were her eyes, or rather, the dark glasses that covered them and the white cane folded neatly in her lap. Sometimes, the woman said softly, her unseeing gaze directed straight ahead, the greatest blessings come in unexpected packages. Mark started, surprised by her words.
I'm sorry.
The woman turned towards him, a gentle smile on her face. I couldn't help but overhear your prayers earlier. You have a new baby, yes? One with some unexpected challenges. Mark nodded, then remembered she couldn't see the gesture. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Our daughter. She was born without eyes. To his surprise, the woman's smile widened.
Anophthalmia.
It's rare, but not unheard of. My grandson was born with the same condition. Mark felt a surge of hope. Really? How is he doing? Oh, he's a firecracker, the woman chuckled. 10 years old now, top of his class, and more energy than his parents know what to do with. Being blind hasn't slowed him down one bit. As Mark listened, captivated, the woman shared stories of her grandson's life, his adventures, his accomplishments, and the unique way he experienced the world. With each tale, Mark felt the knot of fear in his chest loosening, replaced by a cautious optimism. It won't always be easy, the woman admitted, her tone turning serious. There will be challenges, frustrations, and days when it all feels overwhelming. But I promise you, the joy will far outweigh the difficulties. She reached out, her hand finding Mark's with surprising accuracy. Your daughter's life will be different from what you imagined, but it will be no less beautiful, no less valuable. She will teach you to see the world in ways you never thought possible. As Mark left the chapel that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose and hope. He couldn't wait to share what he had learned with Kathleen, to show her that their daughter's future, while different from what they had imagined, could still be bright and full of promise. But when he returned to Kathleen's room, he found her curled up in her bed, silent tears streaming down her face. The joy he had felt moments ago evaporated, replaced by a deep concern for his wife. "Kathleen?" he said softly, moving to sit beside her. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. "I did this to her, Mark," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. "If I had just listened to the doctors, if I had just taken the tests, we could have known. We could have been prepared. Maybe we could have done something." Mark felt a pang of the anger and frustration he had been suppressing. Part of him wanted to agree, to let out the resentment that had been building. But he pushed those feelings aside, remembering the words of the woman in the chapel. "Kathleen," he said gently, taking her hand in his. "We can't change the past. What's done is done. But we have a beautiful daughter who needs us now, who deserves all the love and support we can give her." Kathleen shook her head, pulling her hand away. "How can I face her, Mark? How can I look at her and not be reminded of my failure?" Mark took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I met someone in the chapel today, a woman whose grandson was born with the same condition as Hope. She told me about his life, about all the amazing things he's accomplished. It made me realize that Hope's life isn't going to be defined by what she lacks, but by what she has, our love, our support, and her own strength." Kathleen listened, her sobs quieting as Mark spoke. He told her about the woman's grandson, about the challenges he had overcome and the joy he brought to his family. As he talked, he could see a glimmer of hope rekindling in Kathleen's eyes. "She also said something that really stuck with me," Mark continued. "She said that hope will teach us to see the world in ways we never thought possible. And you know what? I think she's right. This isn't the end of a dream, Kathleen. It's the beginning of a new one." Kathleen was quiet for a long moment, processing Mark's words. Then slowly she nodded. "I want to meet her," she said softly. "The woman from the chapel. Do you think she'd talk to me?" Mark smiled, relief washing over him. "I'm sure she would. I'll see if I can find her." As luck would have it, the woman, who introduced herself as Margaret, was more than happy to visit Kathleen. Over the next few days, as Kathleen recovered and hope grew stronger, Margaret became a frequent visitor, sharing her experiences and offering guidance and support. With each visit, Kathleen's demeanor changed. The guilt and despair that had consumed her began to give way to determination and hope. She started asking questions about raising a blind child, about resources and support groups, about the best ways to help Hope thrive. One afternoon, as Kathleen held Hope in her arms, gently exploring her daughter's face with her fingertips, she looked up at Mark with a new light in her eyes. "We can do this," she said, her voice filled with quiet conviction. "It won't be easy, but we can do this." Mark felt a wave of love and pride wash over him. "Yes," he agreed, wrapping his arms around his family. "We can. Together." As the days turned into weeks, Kathleen and Mark threw themselves into learning everything they could about raising a child with anophthalmia. They consulted with specialists, joined support groups, and spent hours researching adaptive technologies and teaching methods. Hope, for her part, seemed blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. She grew and thrived, hitting milestones that filled her parents with joy and pride. Her first smile, her first laugh, the way she turned her head towards the sound of their voices, each moment was a precious gift. The day they finally brought Hope home from the hospital was both exhilarating and terrifying. As they stepped through the front door, Kathleen paused, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what lay ahead. "What if we're not ready?" she whispered, clutching Hope close to her chest. Mark squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "We are. We've prepared as much as we can. And we'll figure out the rest as we go." Those first few weeks at home were a whirlwind of adjustments and learning experiences. They quickly discovered that raising a blind child required a whole new approach to parenting. Every aspect of their home had to be considered from a new perspective. They learned to narrate their actions, describing the world around them in vivid detail to help Hope build a mental picture of her surroundings. They filled the house with textures and sounds, creating a rich sensory environment for their daughter to explore. There were challenges, of course. Sleepless nights spent worrying about the future, moments of frustration when things didn't go as planned, and the occasional pang of sadness when they saw other children Hope's age reaching visual milestones. But there were also moments of pure joy and wonder. The first time Hope reached out and found a toy on her own, guided by the sound of its bell. The way she laughed delightedly when they played peek-a-boo, understanding the game through touch and sound rather than sight. The peaceful expression on her face as she listened to Kathleen sing lullabies. As Hope grew, so did Kathleen and Mark's confidence in their ability to parent her. They became advocates for their daughter, educating family, friends, and even strangers about Hope's condition and capabilities. Kathleen, in particular, underwent a profound transformation. The guilt and regret that had once consumed her gradually gave way to a fierce determination to ensure Hope had every opportunity to succeed. She threw herself into learning Braille, determined to be able to read to her daughter and teach her as she grew older. One evening, as they sat in the nursery, Hope sleeping peacefully in her crib, Mark turned to Kathleen with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said softly, "I think we should share our story." Kathleen looked at him, surprised. "Share it? How do you mean?" Mark explained his idea, to start a blog documenting their journey with Hope, sharing their experiences, challenges, and triumphs with other parents who might be going through similar situations. "Think about how much it helped us to talk to Margaret," he said. "Maybe we could be that source of support for someone else." Kathleen considered the idea, her eyes drifting to Hope's sleeping form. "You're right," she said finally. "If we can help even one family feel less alone, less afraid, it would be worth it." And so, Hope's journey was born. What started as a simple blog soon grew into a platform that reached families across the country and beyond. Kathleen and Mark shared everything. The good days, the bad days, the resources they found helpful, and the lessons they learned along the way. They wrote about the first time Hope crawled, navigating their living room by touch and sound. They shared their experiences with early intervention programs and the amazing therapists who helped Hope develop her other senses to compensate for her lack of sight. As Hope grew older, they documented her first day of preschool, the nerves they felt and the pride that swelled in their hearts as they watched their daughter confidently navigate her new environment. They wrote about the friendships Hope formed, the way her classmates quickly learned to describe things to her and include her in their games. The blog became more than just a chronicle of Hope's life. It became a community, a place where parents of children with visual impairments could connect, share advice, and offer support. Kathleen and Mark found themselves fielding questions, offering encouragement, and even organizing meetups with local families. Through it all, Hope continued to amaze them. She was curious, determined, and full of joy. She learned to read Braille with remarkable speed, her little fingers flying over the raised dots. She developed an ear for music, singing along to her favorite songs and even starting to learn the piano. There were difficult moments, of course. The first time Hope asked why she couldn't see like other children, Kathleen and Mark's hearts broke a little. But they had prepared for this moment, explaining her condition in terms she could understand and emphasizing all the amazing things she could do. As Hope approached her 5th birthday, Kathleen sat down to write a special blog post. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she reflected on the journey they had been on. "5 years ago," she began, "I thought my world had ended. I believed that by trying to protect my child, I had failed her in the most fundamental way. I couldn't see past what I perceived as her limitations, couldn't imagine a future filled with anything but struggle. Now, as I watch my daughter navigate the world with confidence and joy, I realize how wrong I was. Hope has taught us more about strength, resilience, and the beauty of life than we could ever have imagined. She doesn't see the world with her eyes, but she experiences it in ways that continually amaze us." To the parents out there who might be where I was 5 years ago, scared, guilt-ridden, unsure of the future, I want you to know that it gets better. Your child's life may look different from what you imagined, but it will be no less beautiful, no less valuable. Embrace the journey, seek out support, and most importantly, never underestimate your child. Hope's journey has shown us that sometimes the most precious gifts come in unexpected packages. And while we can't change the past, we can choose how we move forward. Every day, we choose hope. As Kathleen finished typing, she felt a small hand on her arm. Hope had wandered into the room, drawn by the sound of the keyboard. "What are you writing, Mommy?" she asked, her face turned up towards Kathleen's voice. Kathleen smiled, running her hand through Hope's soft curls. "I'm writing about you, sweetheart. About how amazing you are and how much Daddy and I love you." Hope beamed, her unseeing eyes crinkling at the corners. "Can you read it to me?" "Of course," Kathleen said, pulling her daughter onto her lap. As she began to read, her voice filled with love and pride, she marveled at how far they had come. The road ahead might not always be easy, but with hope lighting the way, she knew it would be an incredible journey. In the years that followed, hope continued to defy expectations and challenge perceptions about what it meant to be blind. As she grew, so did her confidence and her determination to experience life to its fullest. By the time Hope entered middle school, she had become an accomplished musician, her fingers dancing across the piano keys with a grace and passion that moved listeners to tears. She excelled in her studies, her sharp mind and excellent memory serving her well in subjects from literature to mathematics. But perhaps most importantly, Hope had developed a strong sense of self and a deep empathy for others. She became an advocate not just for herself, but for all children with disabilities, speaking at school assemblies and community events about the importance of inclusion and understanding. Kathleen and Mark watched their daughter's journey with a mixture of pride and awe. The blog they had started all those years ago had grown into a full-fledged nonprofit organization, providing resources, support, and advocacy for families of children with visual impairments. One evening, as they sat on the porch listening to Hope practice a new piece on the piano, Mark turned to Kathleen with a smile. "Remember when we thought her blindness would limit her life?" he said softly. "Look at her now. She's changing the world." Kathleen nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "She's taught us so much," she whispered, "about resilience, about seeing the world in different ways. I never imagined we could be this blessed." As Hope's music filled the air, a testament to her spirit and determination, Kathleen reflected on the long journey they had taken. From those first terrifying moments in the hospital to the confident, compassionate young woman Hope was becoming. Every step had been a lesson in love, acceptance, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. She thought about all the families they had connected with over the years, the lives touched by Hope's story. She thought about the changes they had seen in their community, in the way people perceived and interacted with individuals with disabilities. And as the last notes of Hope's song faded away, Kathleen realized that their daughter had given them so much more than they could have ever imagined. She had given them a new perspective on life, a deeper appreciation for the beauty and diversity, and most importantly, she had given them hope, not just for her future, but for a world where everyone's unique gifts were celebrated and valued. Hope's journey was far from over, but Kathleen knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with love, courage, and an unwavering belief in the power of hope. As Hope entered her teenage years, new challenges emerged. The social dynamics of adolescence were complex enough for sighted children, but for Hope, they presented a unique set of obstacles. There were moments of isolation, of feeling different, of struggling to fit in with her peers. But Hope, true to her nature, faced these challenges head-on. She joined the school choir, her voice soaring with emotion and beauty. She took up creative writing, crafting stories that painted vivid pictures with words alone. And she continued to advocate, joining student council and spearheading initiatives to make her school more inclusive for all students with disabilities. Kathleen and Mark supported her every step of the way, but they also learned to step back, allowing Hope to navigate her own path and find her own solutions. They watched with pride as their daughter blossomed into a confident, compassionate young woman. One day, during Hope's junior year of high school, Kathleen received a call from the principal. Her heart raced, fearing bad news, but instead, she was greeted with excitement. "Mrs. Thompson," the principal said, "I wanted to let you know that Hope has been selected as this year's valedictorian." Her academic achievements and her contributions to our school community are truly remarkable. Kathleen's eyes filled with tears of joy as she shared the news with Mark and Hope. That evening, as they celebrated over a special dinner, Hope surprised them with an announcement of her own. "I've decided what I want to do after graduation," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to become a child psychologist, specializing in helping children with disabilities and their families. I want to give back, to help others the way so many people have helped us." Kathleen and Mark exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride. They knew the road ahead would still have its challenges, but they had no doubt that Hope would face them with the same grace, determination, and optimism that had defined her life so far. As Hope delivered her valedictorian speech on graduation day, her words resonating through the auditorium, Kathleen thought back to those early days of fear and uncertainty. She thought of the woman in the hospital chapel, of Margaret and her grandson, of all the people who had been part of their journey. Hope's voice, strong and clear, brought her back to the present. "We all face challenges in life. Some are visible, others are not. But it's not the challenges themselves that define us. It's how we choose to face them. I may not see the world with my eyes, but I've learned to see it with my heart, with my mind, with every other sense I possess. And what I've seen is beautiful beyond words." To my fellow graduates, I say this: don't be afraid of the unknown. Embrace it. Learn from it. Let it teach you to see the world in new ways. And remember, no matter what challenges you face, there is always hope. As applause filled the auditorium, Kathleen felt Mark's hand squeeze hers. They had come so far from that terrifying day in the hospital. Their journey had been filled with challenges. Yes, but also with more joy, love, and wonder than they could have ever imagined. Hope's story was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. But Kathleen knew that whatever the future held, their daughter would face it with the same courage, determination, and hope that had brought her this far. And as they watched Hope accept her diploma, her unseeing eyes bright with joy and promise, Kathleen and Mark knew that they had received the greatest gift of all: the opportunity to be part of this extraordinary journey, to learn and grow alongside their remarkable daughter. Hope had shown them that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones we can't see with our eyes, but can only feel with our hearts. And in doing so, she had not only found her own path, but had lit the way for others, proving that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. As Hope embarked on her college journey, Kathleen and Mark faced a new set of challenges and emotions. Sending their daughter off to university was a milestone that filled them with pride, but also with a renewed sense of worry. How would Hope navigate a new campus, new social dynamics, and the rigorous demands of higher education? But once again, Hope surprised them with her resilience and adaptability. She had chosen a university known for its support of students with disabilities, and she quickly found her footing. Her dorm room became a hub of activity, filled with adaptive technologies and the constant chatter of new friends. Hope's choice to pursue psychology proved to be a perfect fit. Her innate empathy, combined with her personal experiences, made her a natural in her classes. Professors often remarked on her unique insights and her ability to connect with the material on a deeply personal level. During her sophomore year, Hope was invited to give a TEDx talk at her university. The topic: seeing the world through different eyes. As Kathleen and Mark sat in the audience, watching their daughter command the stage with confidence and grace, they felt a surge of emotion that was almost overwhelming. Hope began her talk with a story from her childhood. "When I was 5 years old, I asked my mom why I couldn't see like other kids. I remember her pulling me into her lap, her voice gentle as she explained that my eyes just didn't work the same way as other people's. But then she said something I've never forgotten. She said, 'Hope, you may not be able to see with your eyes, but you have a special gift. You see with your heart, and sometimes, that's even more powerful.'" As Hope continued, sharing her experiences and insights, Kathleen found herself transported back to those early days of uncertainty and fear. She thought about the woman in the hospital chapel, about Margaret and her grandson, about all the people who had been part of their journey. Each had played a role in shaping not just Hope's life, but Kathleen and Mark's as well. Hope's voice, strong and clear, brought Kathleen back to the present. We often think of sight as the primary way of experiencing the world. But there are so many other ways to see. Through touch, through sound, through emotion and intuition. My blindness has taught me to experience the world in rich, complex ways that I might never have discovered otherwise. It's shown me that there's more than one way to perceive beauty, to understand truth, to connect with others. As applause filled the auditorium at the end of Hope's talk, Kathleen felt Mark's hand squeeze hers. They had come so far from that terrifying day in the hospital. Their journey had been filled with challenges. Yes, but also with more joy, love, and wonder than they could have ever imagined. That evening, as they celebrated Hope's successful talk over dinner, Kathleen found herself reflecting on their journey. "You know," she said, looking at Hope with pride, "when you were born, I was so afraid. I thought I had failed you somehow. But now I see that you were never limited. You were always meant to shine, to show the world a different way of seeing." Hope reached out, finding her mother's hand with unerring accuracy. "Mom," she said softly, "you and Dad gave me the greatest gift. You never saw my blindness as a tragedy. You saw it as a different way of experiencing the world. You taught me to embrace who I am, to find strength in my differences. Everything I've accomplished, I owe to that foundation of love and acceptance you gave me." Mark cleared his throat, emotion making his voice rough. "We're the ones who should be thanking you, Hope. You've taught us so much. About resilience, about seeing the world in different ways. I never imagined we could be this blessed." As they continued their meal, the conversation flowing easily between them, Kathleen marveled at how far they had come. From those first terrifying moments in the hospital to the confident, compassionate young woman Hope had become, every step had been a lesson in love, acceptance, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Hope's college years flew by in a whirlwind of academic achievements, new friendships, and personal growth. She graduated with honors, her degree in psychology opening doors to graduate programs across the country. But Hope had a clear vision for her future, one that would bring her journey full circle. She decided to pursue her PhD in clinical psychology, with a focus on helping children with disabilities and their families. Her personal experiences, combined with her academic knowledge, made her a standout candidate, and she was accepted into a prestigious program. As Hope dove into her doctoral studies, Kathleen and Mark watched with pride as their daughter continued to push boundaries and challenge perceptions. Hope's research on the psychological impact of disability on family dynamics was groundbreaking, drawing on both her personal experiences and rigorous academic study. But it wasn't just in academia that Hope was making waves. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story at conferences and events around the country. Her message of resilience, adaptation, and the power of perspective resonated with audiences from all walks of life. One day, Hope received an invitation that left her breathless with excitement. She had been asked to give a keynote address at a national conference on disability rights and inclusion. It was a platform she had dreamed of, an opportunity to share her message with policymakers, educators, and advocates from across the country. As Hope stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong, Kathleen and Mark sat in the front row, their hearts swelling with pride. Hope's words painted a vivid picture of a world where disability was seen not as a limitation, but as a different way of experiencing life. "We talk about disability as if it's a fixed state," Hope said, her passion evident in every word. "But the truth is, disability is often as much about environment as it is about individual conditions. When we create truly inclusive spaces, in our schools, our workplaces, our communities, we don't just accommodate differences. We celebrate them. We recognize that diversity in all its forms enriches our world." As Hope concluded her speech to thunderous applause, Kathleen leaned over to Mark, tears glistening in her eyes. "Did you ever imagine, all those years ago, that our little girl would be changing the world like this?" Mark shook his head, his own eyes misty. "Never in my wildest dreams. But then again, Hope has always had a way of exceeding our expectations." Later that evening, as they celebrated Hope's successful keynote, Kathleen found herself reflecting once again on their journey. From the fear and uncertainty of Hope's birth to the pride and joy of watching her daughter become a powerful advocate and changemaker. Every step had been a lesson in the power of love, acceptance, and perseverance. Hope's voice broke into her thoughts. "You know," she said, a smile in her voice, "I've been thinking about writing a book, about our journey, about the lessons we've learned. I think it could help a lot of families who are where we once were." Kathleen felt a surge of excitement at the idea. "Oh, Hope, that would be wonderful. Your blog has already touched so many lives. A book could reach even more people." Mark nodded enthusiastically. "And you know we'll help in any way we can. We've got decades of stories to share." As they continued to discuss the book idea, bouncing around potential titles and themes, Kathleen marveled at how their family's journey had come full circle. What had once been a source of fear and guilt had become a wellspring of strength, wisdom, and purpose. Hope's life was a testament to the power of embracing differences, of finding strength in adversity. She had not just adapted to her blindness. She had thrived because of it, using her unique perspective to illuminate the world for others. As the evening wound down, Hope reached out, finding her parents' hands. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "for everything, for believing in me, for teaching me to see the world with my heart. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, it all started with your love." Kathleen squeezed her daughter's hand, her heart overflowing with love and pride. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, "you've taught us far more than we could ever teach you. You've shown us that hope isn't just your name. It's who you are. And you've given that hope to so many others." As they sat there, hands linked, Kathleen knew that their journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new triumphs, new opportunities to grow and learn. But whatever the future held, they would face it together, with love, courage, and an unwavering belief in the power of hope. For in Hope's life, in her challenges and her triumphs, her struggles and her joy, they had all learned the most profound truth, that sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones we can't see with our eyes, but can only feel with our hearts. And in that truth, there was endless hope for a brighter, more inclusive world.